From WRAL News, this is How to Commit Journalism, part of the Capital Broadcasting Podcast Network. Each week, we bring you the backstory behind the big story and take you inside our journalistic process here at WRAL News. I'm Ashley Talley, Enterprise Executive Producer here at WRAL News. Today, I'm speaking with our reporter, Amanda Lamb, about a story that she recently reported on. I want to give you a little background on how this story first came to us. An attorney for a woman who was pulled over for suspected DUI sent one of our employees video of the pat down or search done on her client during that otherwise routine traffic stop. What it shows is debatable. The lawyer who has a lot of these traffic DUI cases sees these videos all the time, and she said that she had never seen one that was as, she called it invasive as this one. She characterized the interaction between the male police officer and her female client as being a sexual assault, that he touched her in inappropriate ways. So, Amanda, tell us how your involvement in this story began.
Well, we were on a different story on Monday. We were on kind of the news of the day, a shooting that had occurred over the weekend. And one of my colleagues got a tip about this video, and the video was actually shared with him. And so he then shared it with our news managers. They reviewed it and said, this is something that we really need to look into. So we invited the attorney who represented this young woman to come and speak with us. And she actually also brought the woman with us. Even though the woman didn't want to go on camera, we wanted to assess her credibility and obviously confirm what the lawyer was saying on her behalf was actually how she felt.
So once managers saw that email, called you in, what was the discussion that y'all had at first?
I mean, the discussion is always when we have a piece of video, where did it come from? Is it credible? Has it been changed or adulterated in any way? And what are the consequences of using that video on TV? So we weren't immediately throwing this video out there. We were going to evaluate it. We were going to talk to everybody that we could that was a stakeholder in this situation. So normally my stories air day of. And that was a lot of pressure for me because I felt like this was a very serious story that had a lot of implications for a lot of people. And I just was starting this process really around noon that day. And of course, trying to find out if this officer was represented by the local unions. So I was reaching out to them. I was reaching out to Raleigh police, of course, reaching out to the DA. So I was having a lot of conversations, but I wasn't getting the stuff on the record that I felt like I needed to air the story that day.
So tell us what the video showed and what you thought when you first saw it.
So the video was a very short clip. When I say short, I maybe 30 seconds, I'm guessing, of the entire event. And basically it was a woman who
and it's body cam.
It's a body cam video. A woman had been stopped for DWI, and that issue is not in dispute. She had a breathalyzer of a 0.15. But after her arrest, she was searched, and we can talk about this in a few minutes, but this is per their protocol that they search everybody they arrest, Raleigh tells me.
But we didn't know that.
We didn't know that at the time.
Information, yeah.
Correct. And so the search was, as a lot of people who have never been arrested, which is most people, you look at a video like that and it looks invasive to you and it looks obviously very uncomfortable. They are searching, the officer is searching the woman around her breasts. She's searching around her shorts, front and back, in between her legs. She's wearing very short shorts. She's wearing a tube top. And
it's a male officer.
It's a male officer and a light jacket. We also later learned that their policy is whoever does the arrest does the search. Gender is not an issue. But again, we didn't know that at the time.
Right.
So when you're just taking that 30 seconds and you're just looking at that 30 seconds, it can definitely look like something that's, crossing a line or a boundary. But again, we didn't have all the information yet. And so that's why that day around 3:00, I asked us to hold the story. I asked WRAL to hold the story. Not a popular thing to do at 3:00 in the afternoon when
news starts at 4 and we have a large, big news hole and you're often on the lead story.
And this was, it would have been the lead at 6:00. And so it was a big pulling back. But
why'd you feel like that was important?
I just really was uncomfortable with putting one side of this story out there and not having feedback from police organizations, from the Raleigh police, even though I wasn't sure I was going to get it. Mm-hmm. And I had conversations with the district attorney about what she saw, and she didn't feel like it was criminal.
The district attorney
of Wake County. But I wanted to get that on camera, and that was important to me. So we agreed to hold the story for another day, or our bosses agreed to hold it for another day. Mm-hmm. So then the next day we hit the ground running and said, okay, what do we need to get today? And the DA agreed to talk. So that was one big thing. I was still trying to figure out what union he was in. There are two, the Police Benevolent Association and the Raleigh Police Protective Association. And most of the time, officers are in one or the other. Mm-hmm. So I was reaching out to my contacts there, and they still hadn't been able to discern that. So it wasn't a matter of them not talking to me. It was just trying to figure that out.
And also, that first day when you were reaching out, I'm sure you reached out directly to RPD.
Absolutely. And historically, Raleigh Police has not, or at least in the last few years, I've been here 25. So I've been through a lot of police chiefs and a lot of communications people. Historically, they respond in email. Mm-hmm. And on this particular case, there was a lot of back and forth. And then on Tuesday, when I made it clear that the story was going to air, they did respond and said, hey, we would like to do a story about our training so you can see our search training and show you a search so you can see what we do. And I said, that's great.
That was sort of a turning point for this whole story, right?
It really was. I was really very happy that they were going to do that. They weren't initially going to talk about the case, but I said, at least we can show people, and then we can show them this video, and then we can show them the search, and they can make the decision for themselves. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of back and forth about timing and scheduling. And so at one point they were going to come at 6:00, and our news manager said, we're still airing the story. And I said, okay, I'll stay. Mm-hmm. I'll do this new interview, and then we'll air it at 10 and 11.
So this was Tuesday night.
Yeah.
After we'd held it Monday. Tuesday, we aired the story at 6, which includes sound from the attorney of the woman in the video.
Again, and the DA.
Okay, so you had the DA on camera at that point. Tell me, I think it's important to note that this video came from that attorney.
It did. And so normally, for example, if we are covering a story and somebody gets stopped, and we want that video, we, under North Carolina law, have to petition the court for the video. Additionally, an organization like Raleigh Police, they also have to petition the court to say, can we release the video? So the chain of command here was a little bit different. The video, as part of a normal discovery in a criminal case, went to the attorney, which is the normal protocol.
So every time somebody's representing a DUI, ostensibly the lawyer gets sent to the
Correct.
video.
So she had just gotten it on a lark, and not on a lark, she'd gotten it because she's supposed to get it. Mm-hmm. But what happened was, through her, she explained this to us, the young woman who had been stopped came to her just to be represented on this case. She then saw the video, the lawyer, and she was upset by the video. And she brought this to the attention of the client. Hey, I'm not comfortable with what I'm seeing. Mm-hmm. They then went to Raleigh Police, went to Internal Affairs, and they started this investigative process.
And I think it's important to note, she's seen lots of videos like this. This attorney represents a lot of people with DUIs who probably are getting searched.
She said she's seen hundreds.
And never seen anything like this.
She had not seen this type of a search before, and that's what put up a red flag for her.
In the next segment, we're going to hear reaction from law enforcement when this story came out. So after the story aired Tuesday night, what reactions did you get?
A lot of very negative reactions. People who agree with something don't reach out. people who disagree with something reach out.
Right.
And now, as you know, we have a lot of platforms to reach out. People can email us. They can leave comments on our Facebook page. They can text me if they have my number. And a lot of people I heard from were longtime police sources. And
because that's been your beat for years.
Correct. And so I had a lot of difficult conversations with some of those people.
Which we can see because in a very rare instance, the Raleigh chief decided to do a press conference. Is
exactly.
that right?
Well, and I'll tell you what happened prior to that. So we were working on this story about training and about a proper search. They gave us great access. We went to the training center. We talked to a sergeant and a senior officer, very experienced officers in this field of searching and training people how to search. They then gave us a demonstration of a female searching a male and a male searching a female. The techniques that they showed us were very similar to the video. Now, again, it's subjective.
Right. Whether it should be that or not. But.
Somebody may look at that and say, well, the hand placement wasn't exactly the same. The directions that the officer gave weren't exactly the same. And what they explained to me at the training center was, hey, this is how we train people to do it. This is the basic, framework.
Protocol.
And everybody might do it a little bit differently, but these are the steps. And again, they were the very similar steps that were taken. So I felt like we had a really solid story. They weren't talking about the incident, but they were at least giving us insight into what goes on kind of behind the scenes and how officers are trained, and specifically why searches are important. And I think we know that intellectually, but if you're not a police officer facing danger every single day and the potential that someone could have a weapon, I think it's very different. I also think that they have a lot more scrutiny than they've ever had with camera phones and the body cameras. And so they have a lot at stake. And a lot of people probably are saying, I'm not sure I want to go into law enforcement now because of what people are saying about police officers and how they're scrutinizing them. And
almost like being a politician where they're picking apart anything
exactly.
that you do.
And I get that. So from all my police officer friends telling me that, I get that. I understand that they protect us, that they have a very dangerous job, that there are very scary moments when it could be just not checking one thing and something can happen. So we had this story. So then we find out what police union he's in. It's the Raleigh Police Protective Association. My source there says we support him. We believe in him. Come talk to me. So run up to his office, and we're leaving that interview and we find out the chief's about to have a press conference.
And how'd you find that out? Did somebody call you and tell you from the police?
Facebook.
Oh,
it was on Facebook.
Okay.
So, and then they eventually did send out something.
Okay.
But, so I think what happened was the other news stations got on it.
Started asking about it.
Yeah, started asking about it.
And nationally too. Right?
Yeah. And I think, national news started asking about it. And so when that happened, they just decided they had to talk. And I have to tell you, it was one of the strongest moments that I have seen from our current police chief. Because there have been many, many instances where we've wanted her feedback. And those of us who know her know how thoughtful she is, how just articulate about her feelings, about supporting her officers, how passionate she is. And so to see that.
So you know that, but it's not off in public.
No, to see that firsthand in this situation, I think, again, I'm not saying whether you agree with her or not, but the way she came out of the gate, I think was showed a lot of support for her officers and showed a lot of leadership. And that was something that we don't see every day in public. And so it was, I think it was appreciated by, her officers and by the media to just hear where she's coming from.
And by the community, too,
Yeah.
I imagine. Where she chose to have the press conference was also meaningful to her, correct?
Correct. So there is a fallen officers memorial that is in front of the municipal building, or city hall, as a lot of people would call it. And they had an officer, and it's funny because a lot of people, it's not funny, but a lot of people have emailed me about this. And I don't think they realize how long I've been here, that I've actually interviewed the family in this actual story many, many times over the years. But there was an officer, a Raleigh officer, who was killed back in 1980. He had arrested a DWI suspect. She was handcuffed. Her handcuffs were in front of her and not behind her. And she was put in the back of his patrol car, and she shot him. And he died.
Oh.
Correct. And so that's the story or the case that kind of brings up this passion and this feeling of, we just never know. And then today, I think the things that they're looking for aren't guns necessarily. They're razor blades, they're needles.
Yeah.
They're all sorts of things that could be hidden in a small space or in clothing. And so officers are wary.
Mm-hmm. I thought you talk about the chief really showing leadership in how she chose to address the situation. I thought the way that you addressed it on television was also natural and felt like you weren't reading a script. It felt like you were talking from the heart when you talked about being at this police memorial, and it just seemed like a really balanced thing. Is that ever difficult?
I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because we use the word balance in television. And when I talk to groups about what I do, I always say balance doesn't mean 50-50.
Right.
In other words, one day you're going to have maybe you're heavier on one side of the story because those are the people that are talking to you. And then the next day you might have the other side of the story because those are the people that are talking to you. And so you do have to strike a balance. This particular story has created, again, a very strong dialogue, but very strong feelings from both sides of this situation. And as a journalist, I really try to respect that and try to understand it and understand that you're coming at me and you're coming at me, but you're coming from a place of pain or anger or whatever it is. I try to understand your intentions and I try not to take it personally. But that day, again, I felt really strongly that the chief had come out and shown some very good leadership. And I thought her words and everything she said, I just think that it was worth paying attention to. Because what she's saying is, hey, this is a really hard job. This is a really dangerous job. And now, more than ever, everybody is looking at us and watching what we do and picking apart what we do. Can you imagine that? Well, I can.
Right. Yes, you can.
I can. But a lot, most jobs aren't like that.
Right.
And yet they're doing something that protects our community. And so there's a lot of discussion to be had about how can we balance that? People's rights in addition to the rights of the officers and allowing them to do their job.
Coming up in the next segment, we're going to talk with Amanda Lamb more about the process and the decisions that went into bringing this story to air and the follow-up stories that Amanda's done as well. I think that one would expect in any police department in the country that if this were to happen, of course, the administration will come out and say they did nothing wrong. I thought what made this one different is them showing you how they were trained to do exactly what the officer appears to be doing in that video.
Yeah, and I actually said to them that day when we went to the training center, I said, this is great. And I know that it wasn't easy to pull together on short notice, and that's probably why we couldn't do it the day before because they had so many people involved. But, I think we're so afraid to be transparent today. We're such a litigious society. Everybody's so afraid that we're admitting wrongdoing, or if we err on the wrong side of supporting somebody and then it turns out to be something else, oh my gosh, we look dumb.
Right.
You know what? I really miss the old days. I have to tell you, I've been a journalist for 30 years. I miss a time when leaders, like a police chief, can just come out and say it like it is. And again, whether you agree with them or not, just where do you fall on this? What is your position? And to me, that brings the level of the dialogue to such a better place than, people fighting on Facebook.
Right, exactly. I also think that goes for news organizations as well. Whenever I have a tough decision to make about, whether we air something, I always say, give the viewer as much information as possible. Tell them why we made the decision.
Sure.
And, I think the transparency from us has to be part of the story as well.
Absolutely. And that's not very often that people get to see the behind the scenes part of what we do.
Yeah.
As a daily reporter, which I have been for 25 years, my job has increased exponentially. It is not the same job it was 25 years ago. It was much easier 25 years ago because now I'm responsible for so much content so quickly. I don't have a lot of time. I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying that's the way it is. I'm on at noon, 4, and then 5 or 6 every single day. And every single day I get my assignment, usually about 10. And again, we got this about noon. And that's why the changing face of journalism is really concerning to me because I don't want to put things on TV that I haven't vetted, that I haven't taken the time to thoroughly looked into.
So you think it was a responsible choice to push this story, not to air it on Monday?
Absolutely. The reason that we don't air stories, the reason that we don't hold stories too often is we're afraid of the competition. And my argument to that would be let the competition get it wrong.
Exactly. It's better to be right than to be first.
Right. And that's actually how I start all my journalism talks. I say right or first, which one's more important? And most people under a certain age say first, and then most people over a certain age say right. And again, there is no right in terms of a story like this because it's gray. There's so many different elements here, but giving everybody a voice. That's the point. You want to give everybody a voice.
And do you think this story and what's come from it is starting a dialogue? Are people listening to each other? Is that is that a place that you'd like to see the story?
Yeah, I don't know if they're listening to each other, but I think at the end of the day, I think what may come from it is understanding there's a sensitivity on one side about how these searches are done. And I think if they are done the way they showed me through this training, I think that the public needs to understand that that training is appropriate. I mean, they're giving them the appropriate training that they need to do the job. Every probably piece of video like this is going to be subjective. I'm going to see one thing, somebody else is going to see another thing. We have to allow police officers to do their job, to allow them to be safe. And I think it's just a continual amount of training to make sure they are following those guidelines and make sure they understand the guidelines. And then not just the initial training, but they do in service. I mean, they continually train, which I think is important. I mean, I asked a police officer, a friend of mine the other day, I said, what did you do before cameras? What was that like? And he said, a little bit like the Wild Wild West, because you didn't have the same eyes on you. And it's kind of like the world that we live in now. We all have camera phones. And so people could be taping you, me.
Or rings, on your door, Nest, surveillance cameras. It's everywhere.
It's like there's no time to ever let your guard down, to ever just be human. And that's scary. Yeah. I think that's scary. And so I think that we're going to continue to get video, not just from an official source, but we're going to be getting video from people's phones and from the internet. And I mean, we got video the other day, for example, in the hospital shooting.
That's right.
And we have to really take the time to think about the implications of putting that video out there. How is this going to be received? Do we have all the information?
And does it benefit the viewer?
Exactly.
Does it further the story? Does it help tell the story? Often it can, but sometimes it can muddy it, I think.
Exactly. And it can also be looked at as inflammatory and sensational.
Right.
And there's a balance between news being a business that is trying to make money and also being about journalism.
Right.
And so the people who work in the newsroom were about the journalism part.
Right.
But, there's a push and pull of trying to put things on TV that people will watch so we get better ratings.
So that we can stay in existence and tell other stories.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not from a nefarious point.
Right. So it's a constant juggling of those issues, I think. And I feel very strongly that we have managers that are thoughtful, that have good judgment, that take time to vet things, that consider things. And I don't think that happens everywhere.
I bet you had 10, 20 conversations about this story before it aired. I mean, you were in and out of our news director's office all day.
Yeah, a lot of conversations. Yeah. And I mean, at one point, I think it was the day they were trying to air it, the first day, I said, I'm not comfortable with this.
Were you listened to?
Please pull back. Yeah.
Good.
And our main anchor, also David Crabtree, was happy that I had made that stand. But one thing too, I've been here a long time. I hope that young reporters will have the courage to do that as well. Because, you might just say, well, this is the story I was given. This is the story I have to put on TV today. So I think that it's a learning process as you walk through this journey of journalism. And I've got to be honest. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and it's exhausting fielding, these strong feelings from both sides.
Because I'm sure it's not just against the story, it's probably personal attacks a lot of times.
Absolutely. And again, I'm used to that. I mean, that's part of what comes along with it.
Right.
But it is exhausting.
I can imagine.
And I have to say, I've been covered crime for a very long time, and I have the utmost respect for police officers and for what they do. And there's bad in every group of people. There's bad journalists, there's bad police officers, there's bad lawyers, there's bad doctors. And then there's a lot of gray. And I think that we're so quick, and again, in this Facebook culture, we're so quick to just jump and say, well, it's this or it's that. What if it's not this or that?
Because it usually isn't.
Right. What if it's something less tangible? What if it is, a training issue? What if it is, not this egregious thing that we immediately want to take sides on? And part of my training in life as a journalist has been learning diplomacy and learning how to deal with all kinds of people with all different backgrounds and with all different perspectives that I don't always agree with, and leaving every situation, hopefully letting them feel like I've respected their opinion, and then I'm giving them a platform to share that. And I don't think we teach that. We don't teach people that, young people.
I agree.
Anymore. Everybody is so polarized, and it's just exhausting. I mean, I'm glad this week is over.
Right. Happy Friday.
Yeah, but I do think it's an important story, and I think it will continue to create dialogue for a while.
I hope so. Thank you so much, Amanda Lamb. For other shows in the Capital Broadcasting Podcast Network, search podcast at WRAL.com. There you'll also find contact information where you can send us feedback or your ideas for a future podcast.